it is incumbent upon us to fight COVID out of Uganda. Let's just do what we can do. Mask up in public, wash your hands with water and soap, sanitize regularly, and try to keep a distance whenever possible and whenever you can. Welcome to our discussion today, where we'll be discussing and talking about the refugee crisis in Africa. And of course, in studios, the usual suspects, Akol Mandi Amazima and Mututa James. Karibu Mututa.
Asante sana.
You good?
Yeah, we are good. It has been a good week. Of course, it has been eventful. Many things are happening, both locally, but also on the African continent. And it has kept the continent live and known, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's important. Monday.
Well, good morning, dear viewer. It's a pleasure having you on this Pan-African Friday. I think, of course, the whole week has been dominated with the coup. Yes, in Guinea-Conakry. Yes, and we just wait to see how it is going to end. Yes, then here in Uganda, of course, the issue of the panga,
The Vijambia.
Yeah, is still scaring life out of us, but we only pray that our security apparatus that has always managed such situation should manage the situation and give hope to Ugandans.
Okay, very important. Thank you so much. Our Pan-African Friday Day is dedicated to UBC.
UBC,
Today, it's dedicated to UBC. It's a UBC Pan-African Friday. Very important. Tomorrow in Ethiopia is New Year's Day. In Ethiopia tomorrow, they celebrating. They're just getting to year 2014. Amazing.
What the Congolese call Bonane.
Bonane. Bonane, to them. I actually forget what they call it in their Amharic language. But that's why we'll just want to wish them all the best. And why I talked about that is because we intend to have with us online our ambassador in Ethiopia, Her Excellency Honorable Rebecca Mugi Otengo, our ambassador and permanent representative of the African Union. She will be joining us very shortly. And we'll have another colleague also, KD from
the US.
The US, yes. He will also join us to talk about the issues of refugees. But just let's start with the issues of that are, of course, that have been trending on the continent, more so. Kano Mamade Domboye's coup against Alpha Conde, which happened about 5 days ago in Guinea-Conakry. Akol, let me start with you.
Well, of course, the coup is a very unfortunate occurrence, especially in modern Africa, where especially countries seem to be really embracing democracy, seem to be embracing the will of the people as the method to be used in coming up with leaders. But again, what is so strange is that the coup seems to be very popular in Conakry. We've seen civilians, the opposition, even some people in government really embracing it. I think the way forward is for dialogue. The good side of the coup is that it has been a bloodless coup. We've not had people being killed. We've not seen people dying. That is perhaps the only good side of it, that it is a bloodless coup. But the way forward is dialogue, so that really the country should not degenerate, or should not see the country going back to their bad old days, because at least they had made some progress democratically.
Okay. And I think also in history, it was yesterday that Prince Johnson, also in Liberia actually, overthrew Master Sergeant Samuel Kenyon Doe. And of course, by the time he overthrew him, he had risen the ranks from Master Sergeant. He was actually now a General Dr. Samuel K. Doe. That brutal bloody coup also happened yesterday, 1990. 10 years after he had also actually the top of the government of President Tolbert. because he did that in 1980, then in 1990 it happened when he was also overthrown. Mututa, let me hear from you on Mamadi Doumbouya in Guinea.
Mamadi Doumbouya, to a person who is coming from outside of Guinea, may not know much. Apparently, even the people in Guinea did not know much about Doumbouya until when this topo happened. But those in the military ranks knew him better, because has been a serving officer, has been a seasoned officer, is an academician, has a very good record in the army. But when you look at this coup, you realize two things. The first thing is that when President Conde came to power, he promised two major things. The first one was that he was going to restore democracy in the country. And it happens that he had run against Conte, the former president, Rosiana Conte, in 1983 and I think in 1988. Both times he had lost until when he finally got his shot in 2010. But then he also gets a problem within the government. And you know, we have been talking about these things. Say, Ambassador Ekan talked about it, said in Africa the problem we're having is that we replace a president with another president. But then the same president we have replaced with the other president does the same things the other president had done. President Conde comes in power at the time when he's promising all these reforms, but at the same time, he is the first democratically elected president of Guinea. Now, when he gets into power, what he's remembered for now is the changing of the constitution. Of course, the economy improved, and then the problem comes in when he changes the constitution to run for the third term.
To get a third term.
And that, I think, did not go down well on his legacy. But at the same time, when you look at what is happening within the West African bloc, you realize that there is a shift into a new dispensation where the people of the leadership in the Western blocs of West of Africa are trying to move away from the colonial obligations, including the so-called infamous colonial tax, which these people have been paying until paying to France up to today. But also, one could also be suspicious. We have heard from the time this coup occurred, U.S. coming up to, of course, as usual, condemning the coup. We have heard African Union coming up to condemn that. I think Uganda particularly will have come up to condemn that. But there is someone who is very quiet, and that is France.
Why would we even... yes, France is quiet, yes.
Yes.
Because recently we just had the coup in Mali.
Yeah.
I think they came out to make a statement.
Exactly.
Then the other day, we saw President Idris Deby being shot dead in Chad. We saw them actually come out very vehemently, and to actually took the president, President Macron, to actually even come and attend in Chad.
Yes.
And they're not saying anything now about this.
Yes.
France.
Yes.
No, of course, France not saying anything speaks volumes, because Mamadi Doumbouya Kano returned from military training from France 3 years.
So then, of course, that's what people are saying. What was he told?
Now we are asking, what was he told? Perhaps has he, you get it. So, and he's one of the highly trained soldiers in Guinea. He was one of the most trusted, actually, army officers. He was heading an allied military unit in Guinea. So ideally, the fact that France is quiet up to now speaks
louder than what they will speak. So that is one area that the coup in Guinea could also be related with the economics of it. That France realizes it is losing a lot of popularity in the Western Bloc. Recently, I think it was 2019 or 2019, 8 of the countries in West Africa sat down and said, no, we are not going to continue having France on our banknotes. That means that France will have a permanent representative on each of the central banks of those countries. And whichever decisions are taken, they will have a veto, an endorsement of France. But that also goes beyond that. You realize that these people are supposed to have some percentage of their national savings in the central bank of France. And that means a lot. In fact, one was writing, and a professor was writing that if it were not Africa, France will be one of the third world countries.
Oh, not by now.
Yes, because it is Africa that is keeping France to where it is economically. So some of the things when they happen, I think it goes beyond the palace, it goes beyond the coup, it goes beyond the players that we are looking at into a more wider spectrum. Okay. But you also realize, I think, as a person, President Conte also made his own mistakes to that level. You remember at one point they had cut down the funding to the sectors, including the military and the police and the health services, but had increased the funding to the office of the president and also to parliament.
And the ministers.
And, yes, and so that also, but there's an improvement in the economy of Guinea.
Okay.
Now, what is lacking is that realization of that development to the common. But
infrastructure development,
yes,
and not in tandem with the social transformation,
yes,
or the socialization
and
of
we
the
have
people.
seen this also happen in another country which we are looking at recently. I think one of the
Zambia.
Yeah, exactly.
Zambia is one of them where we're now seeing President. Well, away from the issues of Guinea, we now get to our topic of discussion this morning, which is the refugee crisis in Africa. And our guests are online. We have the Honorable Her Excellency, the Ambassador, Honorable Rebecca Muge Otengo, Uganda's ambassador to Ethiopia and Djibouti, and also our permanent representative to the African Union. Mama Muge Otengo, we hope you can now see us and you are right there with us. Can we see and hear you? Okay, I think she's not ready with us here. Yeah. Then Ndugu Kaidi Obi Awadu, he's a researcher he's in the United States. Kaidi, are you there? Kaidi, are you with us? Okay, well, we'll get to them. We'll get to them. I was told they were ready for us, and I can't see them. I don't know what could have happened. But yet again, yep, they should be with us. Anyway, let's now get to the issues of the refugees. We'll talk about the issues in Guinea-Conakry. We'll talk about all these other issues as it continues building. We'll follow the story and see why it ends and what really happens. We'll come in again with experts from even these countries to talk to us about what is really on ground in their countries. But to the issues of the refugees, Ndugu Akol, Africa seems to have the biggest number. I think when you look into the statistics of the United Nations Commission for Refugees, It just shows how much Africa, and most especially sub-Saharan Africa, which of course also puts Uganda as one of those countries that is one of the countries looked at as a country that hosts refugees. But yet again, the problem, of course, also does not seem like it's something that will get from us very soon. It is with us here. What we need to do about the refugee crisis that we keep, that we are struggling with on the continent.
Well, the refugee crisis on the African continent is as a result of conflict. Political, social, and economic. But by and large, political, the refugee crisis on the African continent. Now, given that we have a political conflict, it therefore means that we need to address this. And now, is that then whenever there was a political conflict, the displaced people who run away from that particular area would easily go to another area and they are assimilated, okay? Or they are actually integrated into that community and they live happily. But today, because of the geographical borders that were put by the colonialists, that when there is a conflict in Congo and people from the eastern Congo cross over to Uganda, they still remain with that tag of being Congolese. That is before the colonialists. Because that is how kingdoms like Buganda expanded. Because whenever they would conquer an area, that area becomes part of Buganda. The people there are named, given Kiganda names, or even given clans, and that is how they expanded. The Zulu in South Africa, it was also a small kingdom, but when the Shaka Zulu embarked on the expansionist policy, that the neighboring people that they conquered were eventually adopted. They integrated into the Zulu. They were given clans and given names, and they also became Zulu. So that is how it was always done in Africa. When you look at the migration of the Ngoni, when they came from South Africa, wherever they passed, they left part of their culture, and the people they moved along with, they were integrated and they became the Ngoni. Kabalega here, when he was expanding Bunyoro, the same thing. The same thing. So today, the problem is failure to dismantle the borders, the artificial borders that were put by the colonialists. Otherwise, if there is a crisis in South Sudan, why should an Acholi from South Sudan, when he comes to Uganda, joining his fellow Acholi in Central North, remain with that tag of being a South Sudanese refugee? Why would a Kakwa is still in South Sudan, there is conflict, he has crossed over to Koboko, why should he remain with the tag of being a South Sudanese? So these are issues that I think African Union should address. These are the issues that regional blocs, that the East African community should address. Yes, why would a Rwandese, upon crossing, maybe there is conflict in Rwanda, crossing over, even when they cross over to places like in Tungam, where even in Tungam we have a presence of Rwandans, but he still remains with that tag that he is a Rwandese from that side. So, or somebody from this side, from Tungam, crossing to Rwanda, and they still say this is a Mugande. So these are issues that our leaders should look at.
Ndugu Mututa, how about addressing the issue that causes refugees and the movement and the influx of these? How about addressing those that we curtail that problem?
One of the biggest problems that we have given this area a lot to the foreign forces, because when you look at the issue of refugees, we have a lot of support from the UN, from wherever, to support the people who are running away from their homes, which is a good idea, it's a humanitarian gesture. But I think equal measure should be given to addressing some of the issues that bring about refugees. Because why should we have all these people running away from their countries? We are now saying there is conflict. It could have been economic, it could have been political, it could have been social. Of course, now with the COVID, which is also another crisis, people are being forced to be in their homes. Now, like we're addressing the COVID issue, can we have a system where people will still remain in their places. In other words, we may not completely avoid conflict, because that's a matter of necessity, but can we have this conflict without necessarily causing a lot of this havoc, not causing a lot of this harm to the people? Of course, we were discussing yesterday social conflict, where we have refugees. The victims are mainly children and the women.
And the women.
And we said, no. What about men? Because women and children are running away.
Because the men have been
Because
killed.
the men are dead. So we need also to look at that factor, that men are the target of the conflict. So, but if there are efforts that need to be done, is to how to stop, to mitigate conflict so that people can still remain productive. But at the same time, when we leave this, I think Uganda has taken a different approach, which I think many countries have appreciated, that when you are a refugee and you have come to Uganda, of course numbers are becoming too many, but when you come to Uganda, you almost go home, that you can get land and you begin farming. We have seen people do business from all over who have come to Uganda. We have seen people who have gotten here and build homes. Of course, that's also subject to abuse sometimes, because we have seen people who have come as refugees, but when they get here, because of the nature, the friendliness, the welcomingness of Ugandans, you find Ugandans being also abused in that particular aspect. But of course, those are a few things that can be tackled. But the most important thing is that I think the type of the trend that Uganda has taken in managing refugees, I think is commendable. You get here and you are home. We have seen refugees, Ugandans and others who have gone to other countries, but even having what you call yours is a problem. But I think
even rights, there's some rights
a lot, yeah. You are reminded that you are actually not a person of that country. Some of these are even our African neighbors here, but you find that the way refugees are treated, you sometimes feel it is not the Africanism, the Ubuntu in us. So for me, what needs to be done, especially at the African level, is to ensure that even with our conflict, we should minimize this spill of refugees from one country into another. Or if that happens, then let's have, like he put, the open borders. That if I have a problem in Uganda, I can cross into Tanzania, I can go to Kenya, I can go to the Congo, and stay there for some time. We still have land in these places, we still have resources in these places where we can accommodate our people. But when we leave it to because I've seen many people who have come, especially I've been talking to people who have come from Congo who are here, but the mentality, because that's also the other problem, that these economic refugees also have this mentality of trying to use that to look for greener pastures. But one was telling me yesterday, was an old man who were talking, and they said, if you want to have a greener pasture, you water your pasture. You don't have to go to look for it from somewhere. Now, these people who are looking for green pastures, when you talk to them, even here in Uganda, they'll tell you, I'm waiting to be taken to Sweden, I'm waiting to be taken to Canada, I'm waiting to be taken to Germany. But you ask them, what about home? Can't you go back home and do something? No. There's nothing I can do there. Because he will tell you all the bad things about the country, which is not even true. So I think it's also the mindset of us, the Africans, that while you are saying that we should cross and stay in the other country until life, somehow the conflict goes down, people also want to use that chance to go wherever they had heard of the great picture of the
well, that's very important. And we now want to have on Mama Rebecca Mugotengo and Ndugu Kaidi Awadu to hear from them. Ma'am, I can now see you. Talk back to us and we hear your voice. We have actually seen your picture. Good morning from Uganda and hope you're well in Ethiopia.
Good morning, Mr. Jagenda and team. I hope you can now pick me well.
We can pick you well. Your sound is okay. Your picture is okay. We're happy to see you from Ethiopia, where you are this morning.
Amazing. You don't have to forget to wish me a happy new year, because we celebrate our new year tomorrow.
Yes, we talked about that earlier on to say that Ethiopia is actually planning. They're ending their year, and of course their new year is tomorrow. We wish you all the best. We don't know how you celebrate it there, but we'll talk to you after the celebrations and you let us know what you've done. But that's very important.
If you get to the official residence now, you'll think it's I don't know whether it's a hotel or what, because everybody from the guard to the driver to the housekeeper, they're all cooking to let me have a nice New Year tomorrow, and they are going to carry all their families, but we will have to social distance. But it's quite a big ceremony that we have over here in Ethiopia.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mama. We wish you the best of the celebrations tomorrow for the new year. Now, talking about the refugee question in Africa, which we are trying to address this morning, we want to hear from you, you there, and of course, at the African Union. We talk about the refugee crisis, and what do we need to know, or what do we need to do, and is this something that we can have a solution to which is permanent, or we think this will be one of the ways of lives on the continent?
Yeah, because of time, let me just walk you through just to 1969 at the AU Ordinary Session of the Heads of State and Government, when they decided to look at the situation of the refugees in Africa. And they defined who a refugee could be, somebody who somehow has left his or her country of origin because of some fear. It could be political fear, religious, or others. And this kind of person finds his or herself in another country. And according to the heads of state and government at that time, we were asked that we should receive them. And that was the convention that was passed by our own leaders in 1969. I would also say that it has since changed, because the dynamics are also different now. So we see that displacements are not only on maybe political questions, but also the climate change. Uganda has been blessed to chair the Committee on Refugees, Returnees, and IDPs. That I have done it on your behalf. And you realize that we found out that it's not only a political question that making people now leave their countries. And we need to look at this deeply. Sometimes they say, what is African Union doing? We feel the African Union is quiet. Maybe I would say that maybe African Union is not as loud, but African Union has been trying within the parameters of what we have in our legal framework to make sure that we look at the question of refugees, returnees, and IDPs, and also the migrants, because now we have displacement through migration, and they're calling them illegal migrants. And as African Union, we've discovered that most of these people who are moving out of Africa are very young people. And what do we have to do with the young people? What do we have to do for them? How do we have to plan for these young people so that they are able to stay in Africa, where for us we believe, and I believe you also believe with me, that we have all the resources in Africa that is needed globally. But can we put our acts together and make sure that we take care of these young people with the right planning, and not only within a country, but continentally? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mama. And I think you've given us a very good foundation over the 1969 Convention on the specific issues for the refugees, and of course trying to define who these are and the reasons why this happens. We are also talking about regional integration. Now, when you look at the East African bloc, you look at SADC, you look at ECOWAS, you look at quite a number of these. Now, we have about 8 regional blocs on the continent. Do we think that if these regions integrated by themselves, for example, if we had a fully integrated East African community, would it, in a way, solve this problem? We're just trying to think, what about if we had integrated, first and foremost as regions, would we see ourselves trying to manage this problem?
Yes, like you've rightly said that the regions are about 8 blocks that we have now. But the regions are also maybe unique in one way or the other. I would give you an example of the regional bloc, which is ESC. We are more focused on economic trend. And I think we've done well on that. Another regional bloc that we also belong to as Uganda is IGAD. And I believe IGAD has done well in the area of peace and security, but not so well in the area of economic development. You'll find that one member state belongs to several blocks. I'll give an example of my own country that I understand very well. We belong to ESC, we belong to IGAD, we also belong to COMESA. So we think that integration of the regional blocks and looking at our questions beyond our member states would make a difference. And I think that has been done very well. But I also think that the regions should at one point come together as the union. And that is why we now have the regional blocks represented at the summit, especially the media summit. The next one is going to take place in Chad. We feel that we must give the regional blocks enough time to discuss with the heads of state and government what exactly they're doing in that region to silence the guns that we've talked about as a theme, which was in 2019. But we had thought that by 2020, the guns would be silenced in Africa. But still, we've discovered that it is, in some areas, it's just starting. So I can summarize that the regional blocks are very important in these efforts.
Okay, thank you, Mama. And on that same issue of silencing of the guns, just before the African Union launched the Africa Agenda 2063 in 2013, we had about 5, 6, 7 coups that preceded the launch of the Africa Agenda. And the commitment there was by 2020, the guns would have gone silent on the continent. But we've seen that from 2013 to today, we have actually had more, coups, successful coups, attempted coups, and it doesn't seem like we are even working on that. And yet again, we attribute the issue of the guns on the continent as one of these that is causing people to move from one place to the other. Where is our commitment as a continent to, one, silence the guns, and to also see how to manage the refugee problem?
Yes, I would say that in that plan, we looked at the future as integrated. We wanted Africa that is well integrated, and the Africa that is able to speak with one voice. Like I've told you, we have intra-conflicts, we have inter-conflicts, but we also have induced conflicts from outside Africa. I would tell you that Africa must brace itself to tougher times, especially that we've decided to have the African Continental Free Trade Area. No one is going to be happy to see Africa trade as one, go to the market as one, and trade within itself. We are also speaking of free movement of persons within Africa, which means that we already have about 1.2 billion Africans trying to trade within themselves. That's a big market. And remember that you have all the natural resources needed by others to do the industrialization. So until we understand that some of these conflicts are not the conflicts induced by Africa, but it is externally induced, then we are not thinking as one, as Africa. I wouldn't also like to believe that Africa should accept impunity, but Africa should see beyond the box that we are looking at. Why now? And who are doing this? I think the researchers must help us. But on the surface, we see, we understand, but we also have very few people who are able to speak about it. People keep quiet because you think maybe when you talk about it, you will be next. I want to appreciate my president, President Yoweri Museveni, because he's known to speak out, however difficult the situation is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mama. Well, let's find if Kedi is also online for us. Kedi, can you hear us? Are you with us?
I hear you just fine. It's a pleasure to be with you today on UBC TV.
Well, welcome and thank you so much. We can hear your voice. We've not just seen your picture. We don't know whether you've decided to just hide yourself away from us.
I'm trying my best to look wonderful as we commemorate and celebrate the Ethiopian New Year. The next year, I send my greetings to Her Excellency Ambassador joining us from Addis Ababa. What a joy it is to be with you all today, and especially when it comes to this issue of Africa's refugee crisis. Just right off the top, I'm aware that Ethiopia and Uganda, insofar as receiving and giving refuge through open door policies to the refugees that are moving within the continent, really need to be saluted. And as the ambassador indicated, and I completely agree, ultimately we're going to have to seek African solutions to these crises, especially since some 80% of the world's 65.3 million refugees, some 80% of them are on the African continent. These are unprecedented numbers. I do completely agree that the East African community has a very special role in this, especially seeing that Ethiopia and Uganda have already been very progressive. So I've been contemplating this issue quite a bit. I will say first and foremost, there are too many fires to be put out by the African Union, especially with its current configuration. I contend that the African Union's annual budget, which is, I believe, somewhere in the realm of just under $700 billion annually, is far, far too small. If we look at the African Union serving 55 nations on the continent and compare it to the European Union serving some 17 nations, the budget of the African Union is literally about 1/280th of the budget of the European Union. So we as African people around the world are going to have to take responsibility for us to govern our continent. We're going to have to create the mechanisms by which the African Union's policies, missions, visions, and goals can be enacted by sufficient investment. Last point I want to make, there's a number of points I want to make, but on this very introduction point, I am convinced at the very beginning of this massive and complex chaos that's causing internal displacement and other refugee crises is underemployment. And when we look at the impact of underemployment across the continent, it triggers a whole bunch of multiple patterns of social disaffection, which can, of course, only exacerbate the problems such as the refugee crisis that we're speaking of today.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the Honorable Ambassador in Ethiopia, Her Excellency, talked about the free movement of persons on the continent. When we do the comparison with what we see in the countries of the European Union, you know very well that movement is actually free, that you can move from one country to another country, to another country, to another country. You can actually rotate around all these countries that come together under their ambit of the European Union, which is not the case in Africa, that we still have curtailed movement, even when we think it would be one of those. Wouldn't it be a solution to us if we also embraced a free movement of persons, that I can move from Uganda, just walk into Nigeria, walk into Guinea, just go to Tanzania without the borders that also are causing issues to us? Don't you think that that would also partly help us appreciate or manage the crisis of the refugees on the continent?
All issues, all programs and policies that forward international trade, the movement, not only of free movement of refugees, free movement of citizens, as well as free movement of workers across these borders, are only going to lead toward long-term resolution and solution. This is another reason I'm very, very proud to be contributing as much as I do to the future of the East African community. From my understanding, the impending unification, federation of the states across the East African community, with, I believe, invitations being extended and or welcomed or received from the Congo and Ethiopia to join an East African Community Federation, will only lead us in the right direction. So from my perspective, those policies and investments that can lead toward regional integration, that can lead towards the support embrace of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, along with participation from diaspora partners in the African continent, the success of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I think that we are moving the right direction. We have to be very careful when black swan external events happen, such as the global pandemic, that can set us back along our course. Nonetheless, I'm very, very optimistic. And I think this situation calls for some radical solutions. I'm hoping by the end of the program, I'll be able to put what I think is a very radical but practicable solution that we can put on the table that could allow us as Pan-Africans to have a greater stake in investing across the continent for development issues, especially creating employment for the vast number of youth across the continent. I always remind people when I'm speaking to them, one of the reasons I love Uganda and Ethiopia so much, Uganda is the second youngest nation in the world. So an investment in Uganda is undeniably an investment in a sustainable future.
That's a great contribution, bro. But I also want you to talk to an African, to a young person, to an African today who has the energy to move, and listening to you and listening to us today. Many Africans know that when you cross the seas, when you go to Europe, when you go to America, then you'll have made it. But I'm also aware that I have seen people in California living in the streets in boxes, homeless people, and the numbers seem to be increasing. Now, I think even refugees living in Uganda are better than some of those people living in the streets of and other cities in the US. Now, I wanted you to talk to an African listening to you today about having an Africa which is greener in pasture than running and dying in the waters to look for some life which is even more terrible out there.
You make an excellent point, and it's a very challenging point as well. Yes, I do live in the nation that has promoted itself, built itself now for over a century, or close to a century, as the most prosperous, wealthiest, the greatest nation in the world. And as I think we all can see by the recent events in the pullout of Afghanistan, the mythology of American invincibility, the mythology of this idea that America is blessed by God to be superior to all other nations, this myth has been now uncovered for what it is. And many of us, people of African heritage, who have inhabited this country for as much as 20 generations, we are seeing it every day that this is ultimately, more of us are seeing it every day. This is ultimately not our motherland. This is not our continent. We as an ethnic group within the United States are disproportionately represented in the homelessness crisis. We're disproportionately represented in crises of massive unemployment, of crime, which is definitely connected to the concentration of wealth and income in too few hands of the nation's population, disproportionately represented in poor healthcare investments and outcomes. This is why some of us, myself included, I'm a newlywed to a Ugandan woman and very, very proud to call myself a Ugandan now. This is why some of us now are doing the best we can to firmly plant one foot on the African continent while still keeping one foot in this land where we have so many, of course, blood relatives, but also America is a capital flow. And I am firmly convinced that the more that I can do my efforts to redirect as much of this intensive capital flow to foreign direct investment on the African continent in agriculture, in energy development, in the creation of small, medium-sized enterprises, to the creation of rural processing of agricultural products and other things that will create an economic vehicle, a vast economic vehicle to engage the young citizens of the African continent for a lifetime of a wonderful middle-class development families. This is our critical mission of the moment in the West. I am here solely to build up my mother continent. If I have to sacrifice everything in my generation to the future generations of Africans from Cape Town to Cairo, from Mombasa to Luanda, if it's everything, if it takes everything I have to be able to build this future, I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
Well, thank you very much, Cade and Ambassador. But my issue, I actually want that the ambassador should really address.
Ambassador Tengo.
Yes, is the issue of why don't we, why can the African Union prevail on our African governments to allow social integration? Because when you go to the southern part of Africa, especially Namibia and Botswana, Namibia, the geographical area is bigger than Uganda, but they are just about 2 or 3 million people. Yet you find that countries like Nigeria, countries like Uganda are choking on population growth. Actually, every other time
and space doesn't increase.
And space doesn't increase. But in Southern Africa, even if you've stayed there for over 20 years, even if you're born there, as long as you are a foreigner, you remain a mukwerukweri. Even your children are accessing services. So why can't the African Union come up with, prevail on our leaders to come up with an arrangement where people can socially integrate? Yes, countries may take forever to integrate, but let people socially integrate. That when Uganda goes to Namibia, goes to Botswana, if you choose to stay there, then you easily integrate without being told that no, you're not part of us, you're supposed to go back to Uganda.
For example, yes. I met from
Zimbabwe.
From Bulawayo.
Yes.
Yes. I should now belong to Bulawayo somewhere. President Mnangagwa, I should just welcome you as a brother-in-law there and give me settlement. Mama Rebecca, please come and respond to this.
Unfortunately, your mic is muted.
Well, maybe she's not yet.
Okay.
But then also the other thing which...
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it's okay now. You can speak to us. It's okay now.
I want to thank my brother Paul for bringing out that angle. The first thing is for us to realize that we were made to think we are different by design. That even within the African Union itself, when we sit, sometimes you feel that others are saying they are the Anglophones, others are Francophones. And others think they are of the Arab origin. But it's not the design of the Africans. The design is by others who feels it's better for Africans not to integrate, so that it's easy to manage. So before you even speak about why don't we socially integrate at that magnitude, try to find out, are we the same now? We are not. And you realize that even the decisions that we make, sometimes others go behind the doors and make us think that that decision we have made, we make like the Africa as a continent should be made instead in the member states. And that doesn't help any of us. But I think we are on the right path. You've already spoken about the regional integration, the different regional blocks. But the biggest opportunity that we must not lose out as Africans is the African Continental Free Trade Area. It is more important to integrate in economic ground so that you see the benefits, that with all the coffee that we produce in Uganda, we are able to sell to another part. Look at the food items that get wasted in Uganda. What if we were able to trade with other people who cannot have the benefit that we have as Ugandans, that we can plant 2 or even 3 seasons in some areas in a year? Why don't we work on that? One of the groups in Africa, in East Africa, including Uganda, when we launched the African Continental Free Trade Area in Niamey, Niger, signed an MOU with African Union on what they were calling digital transport, that you are able to load your items from Uganda, and it goes maybe as far as let me say, Egypt. Even if you are not there, you can sit in your office and monitor how these products are moving, the temperatures and everything. If we put our acts together, I want to repeat this, Africa is able to move further than we are moving now. I want to agree with my brother Kedi. My brother spoke about the young people in Africa. You know, when I move in Africa, different areas, I see that there's something we could turn into benefit, and that's the young people. Not all continents now have the kind of young people that Africa has, but we need to turn them into useful citizens in different areas, but also citizens of Africa. They must become productive. Making these young people productive is no longer just sitting for a white-collar job. What did Germany do? Skills development is one area that we should make sure that the young people are involved in. If you have your skills and you are able to offer to another member state within the African Union, even beyond, no one is going to chase you. What if you can sit back in Uganda and you are able to sell your skills on your desk? That's also possible. So what we must do, we must make sure that the young people are developed into a way that, in a way that they are marketable, not only what they can touch, but also through their brains. And we don't lose out. We are not talking of the brain drains. I like what Kedi has said, that we are in other continents, but our foot, one side of our foot is in Africa, another one is in our continent, in the host countries or host continents. But we want to say that, and we speak about that clearly and have more conversation over that. Thank you.
Well, that's very important to both of you, Mama Rebecca Muge and to Kedi in the United States. it just seems like one of our biggest problems, or one of the biggest aspirations, actually not a problem, is to economically integrate. And that's why when we talk about the ESC, when we talk about ECOWAS, when we talk about all these others, we seem to be making strides in as far as economic integration is concerned, and thinking that if we economically integrated, then that would stop our young Africans from seeking greener pastures elsewhere. One of the reasons now, even when we have some political instabilities in countries here and there, but then the economic problem seems to take a precedent over that. We have a mindset affair, or a mindset problem that even the African Union itself is trying to address. In the 1970s, when President Park Chung-hee in South Korea started what he called the New Village Movement, one of the things he was working upon was the mindset of Koreans, having come from that 1959 war with the Japanese. And they first of all went into a mindset affair, changing the mindset of their people to what the Korea we see today. Are we looking at that? Because if we continue, of course, embracing and making this business of being refugees as something that is accommodative on the continent, then we just find ourselves rotating from one country to the other. Are we looking into the issue of also realigning the mindset of people as we push for the economic integration, which seems to be anchoring our integration? To both of you.
Your Excellency, I defer to you.
Let me take it up. I want to take it up from the point that the summit of the heads of state and government unanimously selected President Yoweri Museveni as the champion for integration of Africa. Quite an amazing subject that when he speaks about it, all these issues that we are talking about, he handles them holistically. In 2018, at the Summit of Heads of States, he presented a document on integration. I tell people that if a needle fell on the carpet during that session, I think you would have heard that make noise. A needle has fallen. People listened. In most cases, they are given 7 minutes to present their documents, but he presented this report, I don't know for how long, but people, by the time he concluded, they still wanted more of it. That document has been sought over by many, many people. I don't know how many times we've printed out, and mostly those outside Africa. I want you to mark that. Those outside Africa have called us to have the document even more than the Africans themselves. President Yoweri Museveni puts together the continent almost as a village, and actually says we are not different in any way. He can coordinate the languages, the cultures, and everything about us as Africans, and it brings us in one village as a home. And I think the mindset is also very important. I do believe that. But what do we do? The mindset change can be defeated by the actions. For me, that is what I think. If you think that you are going to live alone, then for us, we begin trading around, and you find that you are isolated. You will automatically change your mindset. I think now Africa, what we need to do as Africa is to act more. My brother Kedi talked about the budget that we have. Maybe I must bring also the data side of that budget, that we are saying that Africa should now go and trade, for example, with the European Union. Then it's the European Union member states that are funding your programs that should prepare you for that market. And therefore, all your strategies, the tactics, and everything is in their hands. And they will ask you to design it in a way that fits in their funding, and it may not fit in the interest of Africa. It is true that until we make a strong decision to fund our very, very important programs, like the baby that we have, the African Continental Free Trade Area. This is something that we must guard as Africans. But if you put it on the table for those you are going to trade with, to design for you, because they are funding it, they are funding the technical areas and all that, it all makes it slightly difficult. We must trade, have our money, and compete. You can't compete if they say he who pays the piper calls for the tune. They also say that there's no free cup of coffee. If somebody gives you a free cup of coffee, ask for the cost. Maybe that is where we must go as Africans.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kedi, come in here and we hear you.
Yes. The ambassador says so many wonderful things that are so inspiring. It's like I want to begin a statement, then she says the next sentence, I say, oh, I want to talk about that. I just want to focus on solution pathways. I think that's my principal task as an African academic in the world, an intellectual in the world. For one, Africa has got to turn off this tap of so many economic outflows, disproportionate trade agreements, the illicit tax avoidance from foreign businesses, as well as the corruption and pillaging of national wealth that's so often stashed away, hidden away in non-African banks, et cetera. So there are a number of challenges there. As a member of a diaspora-born African community, Pan-African to the core, I think that the most radical position or solution that I would put on the table would be for a strategic plan to call the Africans home, not just the recent diaspora migrants, which has contributed to a phenomenon known as the brain drain. We do see some hopeful measures along that pathway of Africans realizing now that they can bring their skills, their talents, their assets, their resourcefulness back home to the mother continent, even after having been educated in foreign universities, to build up the Africa that we want. There's a theme that runs through all of my days called Africa Rising. And just like the sun rising on a brand new day, I see Africa Rising is the dawn of a future. The sun, the dawn is breaking over Africa, and we need to do everything we can to usher in that new day. One of the things that's happening across Africa is demographics, the population shift. I heard a reference to population burdens a little bit earlier in the conversation. I am still convinced, and I've written extensively over the years on issues of demographics and population, that Africa is now the beneficiary of the world's demographic dividend, and that we need not be ashamed at all that realizing how did England, France, Spain, and many other countries come to the power, the transnational colonial powers they came to be. In no small extent, it was due to positive demographic trends. During that period when Europe came to colonize much of the world, well, the population of Europe grew by 360% between 1600 and 1880. The population of China grew, I think, threefold, but when we look at the population of Africa, it only grew by 50%. What happened to 600 million indigenous-born Africans during this time period of the enslavement, the transatlantic enslavement, and the Arabic enslavement is being corrected. It's being corrected now between today and the year 2050, when Africa will usher in another 1 billion people. Now, inside of 1 billion new souls coming to live on the African continent, which is underpopulated, despite what the world has commonly said, if we look at population densities, and I pull these numbers up, European Union population density is 112 persons per square kilometer. Belgium is the highest population density state with 377 persons per square kilometer. Well, if we look at the African Union nations, The population density is 39.1 persons per square kilometer. This compares pretty favorably to the United States at 34 people per square kilometer. So Africa is underpopulated if we compare them to the European Union. The East African community, population density highest in Rwanda at 440, Burundi at 401, and Uganda is third at 165 people per square kilometer, while Sudan and Somalia are at 19 people and 17 people respectively. So there is plenty of room for another large number of migrants to come to Africa. You do not want everybody in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central and South America of African heritage to come back to Africa, because some of them are so mentally distorted by the Ma'afa experience, or great suffering, that you, without a period of reconditioning the mind, the spirit, the soul, the culture, we don't need to add them to the mix. Trust me on that. But we can put together a process. And this is the radical position. There's plenty of room across the African continent to offer for homes and for farming. This is being done with the refugees in Uganda. At present, Africa is home to more than half of the world's unused arable land, with as many as 2.160 billion acres of arable land on the African continent. Only 60%, or fully 60% of it, is as yet unused. There should be an effort, and I talk about this in a number of my books, for the continent and the diaspora born to create a partnership by which we can start to transfer technologies, transfer those most skilled and experienced workers to the African continent, to build partnerships, to build SME enterprises and small, medium, and large industrial processes, to where we have a strategic goal to build African regional integration by the year 2030, and African continental integration on all levels by the year 2050, with a strong participation from those born in the diaspora who now realize, I would love to live on a continent where our population rivals that of China, rivals that of India, and where our middle class has been growing at the fastest rate of all regions of the world since the year 2015. African middle class has been growing. And middle class is actually shrinking in the United States. So I see a long-term solution should be, I'm reminded of the song by Bob Marley and the Wailers, Exodus. This is a movement of our people.
Well, thank you, Katie. But I just have two issues here to raise. And one, first of all, I'll begin with Mama Rebecca Muge, because when she said that President Yoweri Museveni was actually chosen to be unanimously, yes,
to champion integration,
to champion integration, and she did talk about a document, the paper the President presented. I would request that if he can send actually that very document to us, the Pan-African team here at UBC, so that perhaps we can also use that document to champion integration. But the other issue I saw, she did talk about the fact that we are extending our hospitality to actually our Afghanistan brothers and sisters who are here. There's an issue I really have always wanted the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and especially the ambassadors, Uganda's ambassador outside there, that they should market Uganda's welcoming nature. There is no country on the African continent that has people who are very cautious of integration, that are welcoming. What we see, because here in Uganda, when an African is here, no one is going to disturb you as long as you're in good books with the law. No one is actually going to disturb you. But there are other countries that even by the mere look at the way you are walking, they will know that this is not one of us. And that alone, they will disturb you right from the LOCs, the police, which is actually not here in Uganda. So my thinking is that we should think of championing social integration. Because when we look at economic integration, which we normally push for, it only benefits a handful of people, the businessmen and perhaps the people in leadership. But what of my grandmother, my cousin in Bwera, who wants to go to see their kin in Beni Butembo, that is in, they speak the same language, They are from the same clan. Why do they really need the same thing? I remember the other time in 2007 when Kenya had a crisis, to Tororo or Teso to meet their clansmen like the Ikomola and the rest. So the social integration benefits everyone.
Ethiopia.
Yeah, actually, even Ethiopia and also community, the Atekero community. Yes, you get it. So why would they really? Why would actually one have to hustle?
So what do you want Mama Rebecca to respond to?
I think Mama Rebecca, I would want her to really look at the ambassadors of Uganda. That why is it that they are not playing this role of using Uganda as actually marketing Uganda as a center of integration?
Even before, before Ambassador responds to that, I also had an issue with that, because as a person, of course, when the refugees were brought here from Afghanistan, I would have wished.
I don't know, they call them refugees or evacuees. I don't know which one.
Whatever.
Yeah, but once they get here, I think
they're refugees. Or because by then they were evacuees when they were leaving. No, I would have expected to see this young Ugandan, or Afghan, or with a mother, a child having maybe a bogoya, or having some fruit in Uganda, so to market. Now the problem is because one was telling me that would have been a security matter, that they didn't want to, Uganda didn't want to see to show these people that they are here. So what? Because my problem is that is the hospitality we are talking about. That we need the rest of the world to know, look, these people are here, they're in transition, we believe, and we know that. But it also have been a marketing tool for us to show that, well, we have received them here. Uganda is a welcoming country, and those who have come here are happy as one area.
Yes.
But also, the other thing is that I think there is a need to create a free Africa, to free ourselves from the bondage of colonialism. Because crossing a border becomes a problem. Now, if, for example, we have one monetary union in the region of East Africa, if I have a problem in Kenya, I will go to Uganda. I grew up in Kenya. I know the people I grew up with. We used to go to school together. But I still remain the Ugandan. Why? Not because I'm less.
Yet you are speaking the same language.
Exactly.
With them.
with them. Yeah. I think I know some of those places better than any of them. But still, that demand that I'm not a Kenyan, I think should also stop. Now, he was also talking about the other issue of, and the issue of silencing the guns. That by now we expect the guns will be silent. They
should have been silent,
yes,
by last year.
Yeah, but the guns are not willing to be silent.
Now. They're actually making more noise.
Why? Are we? But maybe we are not addressing the audience that is supposed to silence guns. Maybe those who are activating guns are not where we are discussing the silencing of guns. Maybe that also needs to be looked at. And I think for her, I think Africa needs to move fast to have a standing force for Africa, because maybe that will help in policing the continent. And if, like now, if people say we need intervention in Guinea, then we need a force. That we must have the standby African force.
Well, I think that's okay, gentlemen. And you've made it very long for Mama Rebecca and Ndugwa Obi in the US. But in simplicity, we need to find out from the ambassador most especially, how do we leverage from our hospitality? Yes. How do we leverage from this? Is it just a problem that we host to have refugees, or it is something that we can leverage on, take for our own advantage? Number two, Mama Muge, you've talked about a baby here called the Continental Free Trade Area, which I think is very good. And the challenge is here, if we are doing this, but yet again getting funding from somebody else. But when you look at the flagship projects of the African agenda, you also talk about the establishment of the Inga dams. Now, When you start there and when you look at the Inga dams, for example, it is on record that if we actually did this, they would break the record in the world that Africa would have the biggest, the most powerful hydro dams in the world. And if we did all these things now, we're already seeing problems in Ethiopia where you have the GAD now that is causing that rift between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. And it is something that we would think would help the people in that area and even the rest of us, especially when you now talk about the Great Lakes. But yet again, as Ethiopia is pushing for it the other side, Egypt is very cozy about it. You look at Sudan and what is happening there. Now, we have quite a number of these now. Looking at the free trade areas, if you also pushed for the INGA, before we achieve our Africa Dream of 2063, where would this continent be, and how much would it be, and how would it have solved many of these problems which we think can actually be solved and dealt with? Mama Rebecca, come in before Obi comes in.
You're muted, Ambassador.
Thank you. I don't want to lose it out before I make one or two comments on what our brother Kedi has said. In summary, he advised us that actually we should not only look at the financial remittances from our brothers and sisters who are in the diaspora, but we should also look at the remittance of the brains, the contribution they can make, coming together and forming partnerships with fellow brothers and sisters in different areas that they are competent in. And I think I align myself with that position very strongly. I also want to thank you for the empirical statements that you've been making, putting figures and facts together. And I think that is also that is very important for Africa as a continent, that when we speak, let's have empirical advantages of what we are moving for. Or what we are arguing against or arguing for. Now, somebody asked a question, and I think that is my brother Paul. My brother Paul is that we have this hospitality of Africans, of Ugandans. What do we get out of this? I just want to tell you that wherever I would travel in different countries, in Africa, as the chair of the Committee on Refugees, Returnees, and IDPs. This week, I'm likely to go to Cameroon. I'm going to lead a team. They ask me, what drives Uganda to receive all these refugees? I tell them, we are not wealthy. We don't have much, but we are guided by some principles which has been brought forth by our own leader. What does he say? Our president says, when it comes to supporting people in vulnerable situations, it's even not just Pan-Africanism, it is humanity. And he says, no human being, no African must be homeless in Africa. He also says that people don't choose to be in vulnerable situations, but they find themselves in vulnerable situations. The little you can do is to support them to come out of that situation or to live better than what would have happened if they have not done that. Our historical background also informs our actions on refugees. We were once refugees. And if others did not take care of us, probably we not have leaders like President Yoweri Museveni. He was a refugee himself and others. When I share with children who are in really desperate situations, and I tell them that you will be somebody in future, you just have to hold on and keep moving. And I tell them I was once an accompanied child, that I got lost, and I think I was got almost from the borders of Tanzania. That was when I was in Ankole, that war between Uganda and the Tanzania, and those who had, the refugees who had gone to Tanzania trying to liberate Uganda. I'm told by my mother that when I came back, all my clothes were already burnt, but I was taking care of people whom I didn't know. The only thing I remembered about myself, I knew my name and I knew my father's name. So later, when the war subsided, they brought me to the police station, and my father came and found me there. And therefore, sometimes it is difficult to put a line between making money out of a desperate situation and also taking care of those who are in desperate situations. I would also like to ask ourselves that what would happen to those who are caught up in Afghanistan and they didn't have where to go, but you are being asked that, you know, we can take in some of these people, but we don't have where to let them stay temporarily as we try to, they try to transit to another continent or country. And would you say no? And some of the reckless statements which were made by those who don't wish humanity well, I think we disassociate ourselves from that. And I would like to say that it is a contribution, a small contribution that Uganda would make. Why wouldn't they allow you to get there? Sometimes we have the people we call high-risk refugees. High risk. We know the kind of people we'd be dealing with. I think for that, we leave it at that level. But I totally agree with my brother Cole on social integration, beginning from our own countries, that I don't feel different when I'm in Ankole, or you don't feel different when you are in Acholi, or from Teso to Acholi, or from Toro to Bundibujo. Maybe Toro is part of, Bundibujo is part of Toro, the bigger Toro of those days, or from Toro to West Nile. I want to totally agree with the integration of the flagship programs, helping us to integrate further. We have the integration that we are trying to work on air transport. And in Uganda, the president says that not all of us should have the airlines going to every places. Where is your niche? Where is the niche of the Ethiopian Airlines? Can it be the bigger umbrella that we all fall under so that we work together? The water transport, the rail, all those are the flagship programs that we are talking of. The Inga Dam, that would be a huge project for the whole of our continent. And it's just a matter of us understanding that if there's a decision that has not been taken so well by one country, the solution is in Africa. African solution to African problems. Sometimes others who come in, maybe they don't understand the undercurrents, or they may want you even to continue pulling ropes because it's beneficial when you pull ropes. So for me, I think Africa can handle its own challenges of disagreements, small disagreements that we have. You know, also in management, they say that if you have an institution where totally everybody agrees on everything, then there's no production in that place. Mm-hmm. If there's a bit of disagreement here and there, it means production is taking place. But also too much conflict destroys an institution. The same goes for countries, the same goes for the continent, Africa, that we do have. So I do agree with Africa making sure that it puts its feet down to make sure that if there are challenges, we can handle. I also want to say that some of these conflicts sometimes go to UN Security Council. And when you reach at the UN Security Council, you are like not part of it completely, because we have the P5. But you find that 75% of the discussions there is on Africa. Africa has rotational seats for different regions for 2 years. So we don't have the institutional memory on that. African Union has come up with what we call the C10, the Committee of 10 of Heads of State and Government, chaired by Sierra Leone, and our own president is part of that committee. We are insisting that if you discuss 75% of issues in Africa at the UN Security Council, then we must be the part of this, maybe the P6 now, because we must have a veto power too. We shouldn't be just put as we are at the periphery. So for me, my thinking is we have done well in some areas. I want my brothers to agree on that. Some areas we have a lot of work to do. It's ongoing work that we must make sure it's done. And we must condemn what is wrong as Africa. Condemn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mama.
Maybe let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Mama, we thank you. We will actually stop this in the next 5 minutes. We are going to cut the broadcast short here to get into another live. In just a minute, Mama, as you say bye to us, your final comment on what we've been discussing. In just 1 minute.
In 1 minute, I would like to say that the future of Africa is bright. We have the population. We should be prepared to move into the future, having Africa speaking with one voice, and we shall be respected. I want to thank my brother for being here, Kedi. It has been amazing having you and also listening to you. Thank you, the team from UBC, and may God bless all of you.
Thank you, Mama. Kedi, in 2 minutes, we're running short of time. We'll be here in the next 3 minutes. So use 2 minutes and spare the one for us to also sign out.
I would be honored to do so. First, my very second day I was ever in Africa, I was approached at dinner, tapped on the shoulder, and someone said, the ambassador from Zimbabwe to Egypt and the governor of Harare would like you to join them at their table for dinner. I had asked them some questions about agriculture in Zimbabwe, and they were impressed with my response. And having the honor to share the podium, the panel today with Her Excellency, the ambassador from Uganda to Ethiopia is a moment I will never forget. My wife, my new bride, is a Kampala-based broadcast journalist who's writing a book, Where Are the Women? The Voices of Africana Womanism in Empowering East African Societies. I trust that you will accept an invitation to be interviewed for her new book. It would be an honor for us all. To my brothers in Kampala and to the panel, it is an absolute honor to be with you. I've tried my best to put practicable solutions on the table. As a person who has an influential voice across the diaspora, I personally think that the African diaspora has a great responsibility to keep this Africa Rising narrative on its track. I'm going to be working diligently as an honorary ambassador of the Pan-African Movement, Kampala, to do everything I can to bring as much resources home so that we can build our future. We're reminded of this South African term, Ubuntu. Yes. I am because we are. Thank you all for this honor today.
Thank you very much, Kedi. You've done us very good. And the last commitment is actually very commendable. We thank you so much and every blessing. And blessings to you, Mama Amugetengo in Addis Ababa, and we wish you the best of tomorrow's celebrations. Please enjoy as much as you can, and just remember to keep safe because COVID is still with us. Yes, thank you, Mama. To you, gentlemen, we need to wind this out and pave way for Bukalasa. Graduation now, which is coming on in the next few minutes. Ndugu Mtuta.
Thanks to Ambassador for her time, and we wish her the best of the new year.
Tomorrow's event.
Coming tomorrow, and the best in Ethiopia, and of course the African Union. and also to our viewers who are viewing us from within Uganda and across the borders. And because of time, I think we'll have more time to discuss. Today we also want to look at the elections in Morocco, but I think we'll have to look at that next time. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Kali, thank you very much. Akol?
Yes, I just say that the future of Africa lies in social integration, and how I wish that the African Union should talk to other heads of states so that they can send a team to Uganda to come and benchmark, because here in Uganda actually people are encouraging social integration, consciously or unconsciously. So you should come and really benchmark Uganda. Uganda should actually be used as a center for other communities to study how we are actually allowing people to integrate. For example, why would people be put in camps as if they are animals in a farm just because they come from a different country? Allow them integrate so that they can also contribute to the well-being, the development of that particular society, the country, and also the world.
Was arrested trying to integrate.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you so much, gentlemen. Akol Mande Amazima and Ndugu James Mututa, and of course our two guests on the line, Her Excellency Ambassador Rebecca Mogotengo in Ethiopia. We wish you the best of the Masekerem. It's actually called Masekerem. Somebody from the Embassy of Ethiopia sent me what the event is called. It's actually called Masekerem, and it's considered the first month of the year to them. And remember, their Coptic calendar has 13 months. So today is the end of 1 year, and now tomorrow they're getting into another year, every 11th of September. So Mama Rebecca Muge, wish you the best of Masekerem, and to just now invite the rest of our viewers to Bukalas Agricultural College for their 56th graduation ceremony, which you can just see right here. We want to wish them the best, and of course wish you all the best. To just remind you that COVID is with us. Let's do whatever we can do to observe the SOPs as we also fight COVID-19. Now, the experts from the health sector, the medicine sector, I say the third wave can be defeated if we do the right things, and let's do that. Now, we stop this year for Pan-African Friday. Welcoming you now to Bukalas Agricultural College 56th graduation this day. My name is Jagan Asenakola Ziksoka, for on behalf of all the Pan-African Friday team. Good morning, blessings, bye, and a blessed weekend.